democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business. And I have chosen you to preach this evangel.
For all my free market healthcare robbing, stock stealing, retirement fund fucking with niggas. Fuck you little credit card scamming, jewelry stealing, crack selling, liquor store robbing motherfuckers. Shout to the homies, Carnegie, OG, Willie Randolph Hearst, Baruch, Rockefeller, the real Rockefeller, my main bitch Leona, pour out a little Louis XIII, Scott Rothstein, Jack Abramoff, hold your head, my Rothschild niggas, let's get this money. I spend my day peppering America overseas, pension for the workers, nigga please, embezzlement, etiquette, private settlement, I'm better with Confederate rhetoric from my mansion in Connecticut, foreclosed Vic holes at the tenement, I twist words like a speech impediment, I hope you got good credit bitch, if not better get a new job with benefits, while I play golf with niggas and get cheddar with, new money buys brand new carrots, my old money bunch of great grandparents, you got grills in your mouth, I ain't mad at ya, I own every gold mine in South Africa. Thanks, baby, you made me $1 billion. Plus, I own a building for each one of my children's children.
And we are live. Welcome to Voice of Rebellion Radio. This is your host, Chris J. It is Sunday night, and we're going to start off the show with noting that we are 2 days away from this election, selection, whatever you call it, from cycle from finally ending. And by the way, if the bumper overlapped there, just saying welcome everybody to UCY Radio, Voice of Rebellion Radio. It's crazy to think that after 17 months since this election cycle really got started, it's finally coming to an end. Actually, more than 17, 19 months. Trump announced his candidacy on June 16th, which, to put that in perspective, that was after the second show I did at Voice of Rebellion, or at UCY Radio, and now we've had so many shows since that. And Hillary Clinton was even before that. Hillary Clinton was in April of 2015. That's how long this has been going on. We've had a lot of name calling, a lot of spectacles. But ultimately, in the end, what we've seen is a joke of an election that they passed. They told us that this is a democratic choice. This is the people's choice, and that this year more than ever is most important. But in reality, we know the truth that besides all the name calling, besides all the blabbermouthing, the truth about this election is that there is no real choice. There's no real election. It's a selection of a corporate puppet for the United States of America, or the United Corporations of America, and this corporate spokesman, who pretty much represents all the corporations in the United States of any significance, and the Bilderberg Committee, and Zionist Israel, and the New World Order elite, will come into office in a few months and will be selected in 2 days. It will be revealed to the public. Now, the selections has probably already been made. The selection was made back in the Bilderberg Committee back in June, but it will be revealed to the public who they selected. And we have these two candidates, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, that for many years Donald Trump financed Hillary Clinton with her political ambitions, and Donald Trump, his financial ambitions, got a lot of private favors, I imagine, from the United States government, from various different politicians, not just Hillary Clinton, but he's admitted to having financed numerous politicians throughout his career. As being a billionaire landlord, he's had to do some certain things to secure some contracts. And Hillary Clinton, career corrupt politician, who has been responsible for, it has been a major part of horrible decisions by the United States government and foreign policy that got not just Americans killed, but their civilians killed in these various countries where these decisions were made for. And ultimately, she's been doing this for 40 years. She's been in various positions in the government. She was too corrupt to live in the Watergate Commission. And she's been in the shadows of politics and has played herself as the innocent, purely devoted to public service politician. We've seen her emails that she is nothing more than a corporate shill, racist, as we've seen through her emails, vile woman who cares nothing about other people's lives, that other people even know were close to her, and she knew very well she could have it killed at a snap of her fingers, and it would not affect her at all. And that's scary. And that's that's who will be in the White House in just a matter of a few months. Now, ultimately, she won't be calling the shots. The same people that are calling the shots now will be calling the shots in a few months. Obama's masters will be the same ones as Hillary's masters, as they were for the Bush's masters. It doesn't really matter. But what will happen is an intensification of the current plan by the New World Order, and all signs point to it as possibly another false flag like 9/11, another giant war, or multiple giant wars. Wars that will trump, no pun intended, that will trump Iraq and make Iraq look like a small training exercise. These will be Iran. A war with Iran would be 15 times as severe as a war with Iraq, because Iran is a military that's developed, and the military that, Iraq, they knew exactly what their military held, practically, because the United States made their military in the 1980s for their fight against Iran. So they knew very well what they were going up against. And Iraq really hadn't developed their military much from 91 to 03, which the last time that the United States was developing their military was 91. And then by 2003, it was apparent that there had not been too much development in the Iraqi military, not Iranian military, which crushed the Iraqi military in the Iraq-Iran war, is much more powerful. And the Iranian military has been developing for the last 30-something years with the help of Russia and other countries. The Iranian military has made itself into a formidable force that the United States would definitely not want to attack unless they were totally prepared. And there's been a lot of this thing in this election is the return of McCarthyism. And McCarthyism, not necessarily on the ideology, but it has this ideology at the same time. It's this association that Trump, who is the one that they want to lose, so Hillary will take the White House. Trump is associated with the Russians, and associated with Vladimir Putin, which is what we're going to talk about, Putin in depth and what he's done. And, take a little bit of the stigma away from a great leader who's done a lot for his people. But Trump has been associated with him multiple times, and there's this talk of stuff that you've even heard from since the Cold War. They're calling the Russians is no longer what the United States pretended, that it was a sketchy alliance, or that they kind of in between, a frenemy is in between. Now it's that they're blatantly an enemy, is what they've labeled Russia, and they've a threat to national security. And they've even called them communist, which is completely inaccurate, because Russia has not been communist since 1985 in reality. And the Soviet Union fell apart in 1991. So most of the establishment of the Communist Party are far away from any position of power nowadays. And in fact, you have people like Natalia Polonsky, who is the chief prosecutor in Crimea, so recently annexed, by the vote of the people of Crimea annexed by Russia, who see the czars. And it definitely shows a reversal of, that would have never happened in the Soviet times, because any glorification of the czar was heavily illegal, I'm pretty sure, during the Soviet times. And now we have people that believe that he wasn't actually a good leader. Tsar Nicholas II are now in positions of power. I'm not agreeing with their belief, but I'm saying that those people exist now in the positions of power in Russia, and that generally the opinions of the pre-Soviet era has definitely improved since the Soviet times have ended, which definitely shows a reversal, because that was one of the biggest things that the Soviets pushed, is that this system is better than what we had before, that we can't go back to the Tsarist era, and that that all enemies of the Russian Soviet state are get lumped into generally the same group. It's like, those really was more early on that throwing people into the monarchists, that these people were monarchists, so they all got lumped together and prosecuted or whatnot. And then there was the Trotskyists that got all lumped together. And Trotsky, ultimately going back to that, is that now it's the opinions on people, for example, on the Bolsheviks, the three leading Bolsheviks that are the most commonly known Bolsheviks that we know of: Lenin, Stalin, Trotsky. The opinion of those three is definitely not the same, and they've definitely lost favor over the years, after the last 25 years, especially Trotsky Lenin. And Trotsky always has been disfavored ever since that was the internal political enemy that was demonized for most of the time in the Soviet period. But people are a lot more critical on just the whole period of the Russian Revolution in general, and some of the more ugly things that took part, and more questions have came up about the purges by Stalin, and people are no longer mystifying Joseph Stalin as they did in the past as the sole defeater of Nazism and the sole savior of Russia, almost. As he was pushed for many years, even after the Soviet Union repudiated Stalin. I'm pretty sure there was still this cult of personality. It was kind of hard to shake afterwards of Stalin, and that Stalin was responsible solely for Russia's victory in the Great Patriotic War, aka World War II. But in reality, is that Stalin was almost responsible for the defeat of the Soviet Union during World War II, because of his sabotage attempts, or not. It's not that he intentionally sabotaged, but the fact is his horrible strategy that he used, and that his strategy was mainly just for self-preservation and political/personal aims was his reasons for wanting to win the war. And also the low-level Red Army that were mostly responsible was a lot more that kind of stuff, rather than direct decisions from Stalin on why they were victorious in the war with the Nazis. Nowadays, inside of Russia, definitely a lot more just criticalness of the whole communist period, the whole Soviet period in Russia has definitely emerged. And now with Solzhenitsyn getting popular is also a giant sign, because for many years his books were illegal in the Soviet Union, and now they're actually mandated to be read in their public education system. In their education system, they read they read the Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, which outlines the horrible crimes that were committed during the Gulag system, in the Gulag system by Stalin's government and the and the Soviet government did against political prisoners, and mainly a lot of innocent people that were thrown in the gulags for no reason besides that they opposed Joseph Stalin. And also, it became more, people have realized, in general, looking at the past, is that some of the things that the Soviet Union claimed to be was not exactly true. For example, that the Soviet Union claimed, of course, is that the belief that that it was a struggle led by the leaders were part of the struggle, but in reality there was a definite ruling class inside, especially during the Stalin era, where just Stalin's inner circle enjoyed extreme extravagance, participated in exploitation of their people, and by all means it was no different when it comes to the exploitation and really the production had changed, but it was just still workers being exploited by a ruling class during Stalin's period, like what was before during the Tsarist era. And the NKVD would hunt you down for the small acts of dissidence against the state, while some of the accounts show that it was more repressive actually than before in the Tsarist years. That yes, the secret police existed, but the Tsarist secret police was only in 3 cities, while most of the rural area was actually no presence of the secret police. While the NKVD and then later the KGB seemed to be crawling everywhere inside the Soviet Union. So all this stuff goes to show you that the people of Russia are definitely not. They definitely are more critical of the whole Soviet period in general, and that the country is definitely not communist anymore. That's obvious. And Putin is actually, with criticism from a lot of people inside of Russia, has not shown to be very fond of the other Vladimir in Russian history, which is Vladimir Lenin. And as called Vladimir Lenin at one time, he said that his policies were like a bomb under Russia. And at one also has called Vladimir Lenin a traitor. I think he's called the Bolsheviks traitors to the Russian country. Also, like one of Putin's favorites, one of the people closest to Putin's circle would be probably, when it comes to one of the people that's became almost like a face of the whole Putinist movement in United Russia would be Natalia Polensky. And she compared Lenin to Hitler. So that would be absolutely 100% unheard of 30 years ago, 35 years ago, when we were still in the Brezhnev era, and all the political dogma and the political, all the propaganda of the Communist Party was still heavily enforced. Then everything really came unraveling pretty quickly. Once 1985 came around, Chernenko dies, the last really hardline Soviet leader, giving pass to Gorbachev's entry into politics, which it was one form of problems for another form of problems, which this form of problems showed them to be almost brought the end of Russia, with Gorbachev opened up the period of the 90s, the wild 90s, which almost destroyed Russia, and the sell-off of everything going at some things going at 5% of their actual value. Like for example, their state media worth $1 billion. I think sold for $50 million to Berdiz. I think it was Berezov is his name, which was an oligarch that's actually good friends with, I believe, Marvin or Neil Bush. I think it's Marvin Bush, one of the Bush brothers, which is one of the Bush brothers. I think he helped funded Marvin Bush's Ignite. I think it's the Ignite education programs, which were pretty much passed along because of No Child Left Behind. So now you see this connection. Now, what's funny is that they'll talk about Trump's supposed connections with Putin and Russian oligarchs, but they won't talk about the very real and established connection between the Bush family and these corrupt Russian oligarchs as we saw with Boris Berezov, and his funding, and this whole the big triangle right there: Berezov, Marvin Bush, and George W. Bush in power. George W. Bush passes along his crappy education program via No Child Left Behind. Berezov funds it with his vast wealth over from Russia. He wasn't the sole funder of it, not to my knowledge, because I'm pretty sure that Marvin Bush had a lot of money himself. The whole Bush family does. They're all millionaires, and it's like a royal family. It's a corrupt crime syndicate inside this country, and the media still protects them. As you saw, one thing this is revealed inside this is that despite I'm sure 60%, 70% of this country heavily disliking the Bush family, especially George W. Bush. 70% of this country disliking George W. Bush. They'll still defend George W. Bush and the Bush family and the Bush dynasty. As we saw during these debates with Donald Trump, they made him seem like he was such a jerk for calling on Jeb Bush for some of these bad, and really just scraping the surface of the whole Bush family and their many crimes. And the fact that Jeb Bush belonged to that family is definitely another person complicit. As we saw what he did here as governor of Florida and his corruption that happened here. When we had Jeb Bush as governor at one point, George W. as president, and former President George H.W., and then we got Marvin over there making money off of No Child Left Behind. And if I don't got Marvin and Neil's the youngest one. So there's another one I'm getting, I don't know. There's Marvin, Neil, Calvin, I think. That's the other one. Calvin, I think, was, maybe that's Calvin Bush. And Marvin Bush is the one that's got the one that had the security contract at the World Trade Center. And another coincidence you never hear in your education system, you'll never hear in high school, you'll never hear on the news ever about back in 1997, he got the contract at the World Trade Center. It just happens that one of the Bush brothers gets the contract at the World Trade Center. You won't hear about the other one was his, helped contribute with his, and made a lot of money off the rotting of our education system in the 2000s via No Child Left Behind. Now it's worsening with Obama's Common Core, and what's next is Hillary Clinton. Who knows? I mean, the Common Core is pretty bad, but I guess Hillary Clinton could possibly make it worse. Our education system has slipped from number one in the world during JFK to number 17. That was a few years ago. So I don't even know how they really figured these ratings. I think it's down around number 30 now. And I mean, to put in perspective, we're down with like countries like Estonia, Vietnam. I think they surpassed us, Vietnam. These countries that are very poor, third world countries that have way less resources and money in order to provide a good education for the students. And we're way behind we might be only at number 30, but we're still way behind number one. It's not like it's a close bunch of 30. Those ones at number 1, 4, 7, we're talking about South Korea or Cuba is almost might be, when it comes to from start to finish, especially the university system in Cuba, and what they produce is that they produce all these very gifted specialists, well, not even specialists, they're doctors. That's the thing that they're so amazing about Cuban doctors is that they teach them everything. They don't send them to become an eye doctor, everything. They teach them a little bit of everything. And it's like our all-around medical knowledge, and there's so many of them that only the best make it. And provides for a very high quality medical system, because of the ones that even though a lot leave, still a lot stay. So that's why Cuba. So you see, in the way that with the great education system, they also were able to make a great medical system at the same time. While here we have these talking heads of doctors. It's like I'm not shitting on every doctor in the United States, but. Come on. It's like they'll tell you literally the shit that came out of the pamphlet or whatever, about whatever thing they're talking about. It's like, oh, you are having an upset stomach or whatnot? Okay, how about they prescribe you some pill or whatnot and tell you some common sense thing about, oh yeah, I shouldn't eat these foods after 6 p.m. It's like, well, thanks. I thought you were going to give me a little bit better insight than that. That's people with 12 years of studying, and this is what is being pumped out. And I see, future medical students when I went to high school, and they're telling me that I'm crazy because I think that fluoride is bad for you. I'm like, you are going to be possibly my doctor one day, and you're telling me that fluoride is not bad for me? That I'm crazy for criticizing the fact that we're one of the few countries on the planet that puts fluoride in the water? Most of Europe doesn't use fluoride in the water. And there's a lot of places in the United States that don't use fluoride in their water, I don't think. Pinellas County was about to not use fluoride in the water. St. Pete is included. St. Pete, Florida would have not had fluoride in the water. But thanks to a vote, they decided to put it back in. And you know what's fluoride? It's industrial waste. It's so corrosive, they have to put it in special containers just so it doesn't seep through. And they're telling me, these people, these geniuses, that's what the school system will tell you, is that these people are fucking geniuses, and they're going to tell me that fluoride is, if you talk about fluoride in the water, you're crazy, you're demented, or something like that. Yeah, great. These are the fucking geniuses that are being pushed along. And it's like, I'm wondering right now if there's some of those people that are, like what just happens the one night that it's like, hey, I wonder what that nut job Chris J is talking about on the radio tonight. And they tune in, and it's just like they hear me talk about them, and it's just like they're about to throw their fucking device across the room or something like that. Nowadays these same ones are actually probably now in college right now, which, like I said, is that our university system really pumps out some great professionals these days. Really, I mean, when it comes to, we focus so much nowadays on STEM, and that's the only thing we're good at pumping out nowadays is engineers. Tons of engineers. We're telling everybody that that's the only degree that pays anything nowadays, because it's kind of true, unfortunately, is that engineers get paid a great amount of money, all these technology, ITs and stuff like that. Well, you have doctors in a lot of places making $50,000, out in the country especially, and even in suburb areas when, what their responsibility is quite a bit more. I mean, talk about doctor, really, this decision can change people's lives, and IT makes you easier to watch porn, seeing some server somewhere. The difference, I mean, of course there's an importance to it, but the fact is that we're not looking at priorities right, and when it comes, and we're taking away attention from important professionals in this country, and not shaping good doctors like some countries have done, which also affects our medical system later. And we're turning, doctors that became into something else, no longer doctors, it became pharmaceutical referral specialists. Pharmaceutical referrals. That's what practically it became when you go to the doctor, and it's just like, oh, here's some more pills, And we're also taking away a lot of focus on history, because obviously, if people knew the history, people would know what the fuck's going on in this country, and would start questioning and be like, okay, wait a minute, we're doing the same thing that Nazi Germany and Stalin's Russia did with this gun control shit. We have a leader that's saying the exact same things. Obama, one of his quotes literally just like exactly like Stalin about the. There's one actually in the Hillary Clinton. I know there's ones like about talk about society and the role of the state pretty much over a person's life. She has almost like the same exact thing with a few different words as Adolf Hitler. Is that pretty much the state becomes before the individual. There was actually a thing where this guy went out on the streets and was asking people, some American city, I don't know which one, but it's like he says Hitler or Clinton, whatever quote, and everybody says Hitler, 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 and then they're surprised when they hear that it's Hillary Clinton. Look by the rhetoric and the words, they love to pass this idea right now in the media, and it's what they're doing 2 days before the election. They keep doing is that the Trump is a fascist, and he's the only one that's a fascist. It's the first time I even hear the word fascist being pushed by the media. Which it's funny because all of these politicians are fascists. I mean, if you look at the definition, it's the merger of corporate and state power. But to the media, the definition seems to be mean guy who says bad things about women. And Trump is definitely, and they might even go to the extent and start talking about, they'll say about, fascism equals Nazism, but they never say the true definition of what Trump is, and ultimately what Trump is that he's a fall guy. He's the guy at the end of this election to lose. He knows he's going to lose, and honestly, if he actually saw, and this is a real election, there'd be so many things he would have done differently. You think that he really has that heart of keeping his mouth shut. When it comes to women in this country, that's really where, he's lost a lot of supporters. Because when I hear the young generation of the, people my age, what seems to be the main criticism, and unfortunately, it's not really to talk about the Muslims. That seems about 5% maybe of what they talk about, why they don't like them, which is really the most alarming thing to me of him, is the fact of his callous attitude towards mistreatment of Muslims, and the fact that we should, and Ted Cruz also had the same idea as well. It's about patrol against Muslims in the country. It's just a general opinion in this country of Islamophobia that has gotten worse. But what I hear mostly is that apparently is because of the sexist quotes and his dirty talk apparently, but especially with the one tape from 11 years ago, which it is wrong. If he actually does believe about that's a right way to treat women, is that you can just grope them and kiss them without their consent. That's very wrong, 100% wrong. But that is not even, when it comes to what I've heard of him talk about Iran and stuff like that, and what Hillary's talked about, the same stuff on Iran. That's the scarier stuff. Is that to talk about that we could just be careless about pushing a war that will cost possibly 500,000 American lives and 5 million of their lives. Because as bad as Iraq and as bad as Afghanistan were, is that this war, compared to Iraq, would be 50 times worse. Well, not 50 times, but, I would say a solid 15. Iraq compared to Iran. Iran is a whole different type of war, and is not a demoralized military. In fact, the Iranian military is heavily, they're definitely ready to fight. The Iraqi military, they were, they barely even got paid, and there wasn't a lot of loyalty because of the way they were treated, I guess. And in fact, in the '91 war, I think a lot of them didn't even have clothes. They were just that underfunded. And of course, underfunded military means lack of morale, and also the United States knew exactly what they were going up against. It makes it a lot easier. It's like it'd be like some person that you gave, you knew that the only stuff that he had to fight you with, I don't know, you gave him a baseball bat or whatnot, and then later he becomes your enemy. I don't know, a really shitty analogy here, but just bear with me. And then 2 weeks later, you guys go to fight, and it really wasn't. It's not really been that much time at all. You have a good, and you probably didn't get anything else to fight you with. You know exactly what's going to come with you at, and so you bring whatever to defend yourself with, and you bring something to beat him up, and then fight's over. So they knew that after 12 years of sketchy intel about what the Iraqi military, and they probably knew pretty well what the Iraqi military had, because I'm sure that their intelligence services weren't that great where it was like they couldn't even permeate and get intel about what's going on there. No, it's the media. I've noticed that they push these superficial things, like I said about is that they think he's a fascist, but fascist means merger of corporate and state power. They say he's a fascist, they equate it to Nazism, and which Nazism, Trump has apparently, he's gotten some of the people that think that way, I guess, in this country to support him, but Hillary Clinton has she has the people that really fuck over the working class of America and the minorities of America. And you hear what she had to say about super predators, calling black youth super predators. And, she, and obviously what our emails were saying that our inner circle is racist. Hillary, Donald Trump, they're both the same thing. And for many years they were friends. They even went to, I believe that Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton went to his marriage with one of his marriages, one of his 3 marriages. It looked kind of recent. I think it was Melania, I call her Melania, which his trophy wife. I kind of laugh every time. It's like, about his wife up there, and he's talking about the immigrants and talking about how immigrants are going over this country, but at the same time he has his wife up there talking a thick Slovenian accent about how Trump would be a great president. And he doesn't mention anything about Israel, our parasitic relationship with them, how we're sending $5 billion a year to Israel. And as well, he doesn't mention anything about doesn't also mention anything about our relationship with Bahrain and these other. He talks about it a little bit with Saudi Arabia. But in Saudi Arabia, he just makes it seem like the money thing, but it's a heavily moral thing why we should not be supporting Saudi Arabia, and the fact that they are a consistent abuser of human rights, and they kill people, they kill innocent people in their country and behead them and stone and behead them. It's like medieval times. It's exactly. It's exactly like the kind of stuff they used to do in the medieval times for punishment. Is what they do inside of Saudi Arabia every day. They've had more executions. You put like a comparison between ISIS and Saudi Arabia, and they're having more. You see the amount of executions, beheadings they do, and it absolutely trumps ISIS for what they do. And ISIS also is funded by the Saudi and the Israeli government and the United States government. But the ideological center of the ISIS movement comes from Saudi Arabia. Wahhabism in general. Wahhabist terrorists would not exist without Saudi Arabia and their clerics preaching these absolutely ridiculous and absurd statements and the twisting of Islam to fit the Wahhabist beliefs comes from Saudi clerics. These Saudi clerics, which, they're the equivalent of the Zionist rabbis. They say stuff like, the Zionist rabbis thinking that talk about how Jews are gods on this planet or whatnot, is what these Saudis preach to the Wahhabists and to these terrorists inside of different countries in Syria and to Iran, where the terrorists remain mostly dormant. And also, what has been one of the main reasons why the ISIS has not won in Syria? Vladimir Putin. But you don't hear the media talk about that Vladimir Putin has done a great job in defeating ISIS in Syria and holding them back and pushing them out to the desert. This year, all the successes against ISIS, a big part because of Russia's entrance into Syria, and also the Iranians' entrance into Syria. But Vladimir Putin, they talk about him as such a bad guy. They talk about him. They make it almost seem like he works as ISIS. He's been responsible for more terrorists being killed in the Middle East than any other non-Middle Eastern leader in the entire planet. I say non-Middle Eastern leaders because the Iranians and the Syrians. Assad has killed more terrorists than any leader on the planet with the Syrian military. It's a fact that the mainstream media will never acknowledge. I almost feel like, the way I'm talking, it's almost the way, it's almost like a Trump talk. Just, I need a voice. It's like, never, it's a huge victory. in Syria is what Assad's been able to accomplish. But you'll never hear the rigged media, lying Ted Cruz or crooked Hillary tell the truth about what's going on in Syria. Yeah, I don't have the sound of his voice, but I can do the style of his talking. See, I can do the accent a little bit, but let's see. I try. Huge wall on the southern border. So I see it just comes out too much like that. It doesn't come out right. I try to do the Trump accent. Shit, I'm gonna start going through some accents right here. Start doing the Italian accent. Huge, beautiful wall. I'm telling you, it's just gonna be great. Hey, leave me alone. I'm eating here. I don't want to hear about the wall right now. Okay, don't you see? I'm watching Jersey Shore here, eating meatball sandwich. I really do need a co-host to keep me from wandering off into my own things I do here. Or I haven't even called her. I haven't checked the chat room. I'm about to talk a little bit more about Putin in here. And Vladimir Putin has been a huge part of the victory inside of Syria against terrorism. And he hasn't just bombed ISIS, he's bombed other terrorist groups, including al-Nusra and Al-Qaeda, and also the Islamic Front and the Free Syrian Army. Now, this is what the media has criticized Putin about, is that they say that he's focusing strikes against the Syrian rebels. The Syrian rebels are terrorists too. And the media will have you believing that they are just freedom fighters in the country fighting against the evil Assad regime. But these people cut off heads. These people use chemical weapons, or at least evidence that they do that. They crucify people, and they target minorities. Assad's military protects minorities, is 90% Sunni, despite the fact that their government is mainly Shia, shows the inclusiveness of their military. And as well, the Syrian military is also allows a lot of women into the military. There's a lot of women fighters. In fact, there's been some women that have been killed battling ISIS. The Syrian military is inclusive of a lot of different people, not just, in ISIS, you're going to find the same type. So, Wahhabists and Syrian rebels and all that, there's going to be the Wahhabist dudes. They're going to be fighting for them. And the Syrian military, I've noticed, is that they have even people older, that have been there a long time, I guess in their 40s and whatnot. I see these pictures of men in their 40s fighting. It's the people against foreign invasion is what's going on in Syria. And Russia, the difference between Russia and the United States position in Syria is that the United States is not asked by the Assad regime to be there. They are not targeting ISIS. They're targeting the Syrian military. The Russian military was asked by Syria to be in there. They are targeting the Syrian terrorists, not the Syrian military. And also they've kept their numbers from going unnecessarily high. They've only had, at one point, right now they have maybe 1,200 soldiers inside of Syria, 1,100 soldiers inside of Syria, compared to what the United States will probably eventually do, and probably send 100,000 in. And when they evade the country, and the United States military has much different intentions, obviously, is that the United States military is going to help ISIS get into power. And I wonder what kind of spin they're going to do, is that because I feel like they can't hide this forever, what they're really doing inside of Syria, that they can't pretend like that they're fighting that they're fighting terrorists when they're not really, and they're fighting the other guys, the people, the Assad regime. So I wonder when they're going to have to admit to the people that they were never really fighting ISIS, or that they were actually fighting the Assad regime, and how they're going to do it. Are they going to say outright, they could say outright, that you know, that now ISIS is a United States ally or whatnot, and that we killed all the radical leadership, or that we were duped, and really these guys were the radical guys. I don't know. I feel like some kind of thing like that's going to happen, and I don't know. I feel like there's no way they can keep, when they send in 100,000 men into Syria, that they'll be able to hide this from the American people. American people are already seeing through it now. It's a relatively small operation at this point, with just a few ground soldiers and some Air Force striking. But when it's a full out, tons of airstrikes and really maintaining the 100,000 men on the ground, what are they going to say then? Also, of course, that's opening the door for a war with Iran, because at one point Iran had over 15,000 soldiers there. So over 15,000 Iranians versus 100,000 United States. You know that if the United States is there, and a bunch of the Iranians are going to up their numbers and bring in maybe 75,000 Iranians or whatnot. The kind of that'll be the initial conflict that'll start will be already very bad to begin with, and then of course they'll probably up the numbers as they go. 100,000 turns into 300, turns into 700. And Iranians, they they'll eventually have to send most of their military force, so maybe 900 versus 700,000 United States. And as you see, within this would probably just happen within a few months. The up in the deployments from the start of from the major outbreak of the war. Really could say almost the war is already, in a way, it's almost here. They already have soldiers of different sides, both the United States and the Iranians are there. And of course the Syrians are there because they are in Syria. So when the United States ups their amount and the invasion actually happens, that's when the escalation of the war happens. And the United States will probably do that following some kind of false flag here in the United States, which they'll blame the Iranians or the Syrians for. I'm sure that whatever false flag they do will be at a big scale like 9/11. I mean, even Netanyahu or Dick Cheney said that an attack on New York seems to be imminent, or that it is imminent. They said, in fact, Netanyahu said it would be worse than 9/11. It will be happening in New York in 3 to 4 years. Or I think Dick Cheney said it would be worse than 9/11, and Netanyahu said that the attack would be in New York 3 to 4 years. This was said in 2013. And Netanyahu makes a prediction, you better watch out, because it's not just a prediction, that's a plan of action. And there are probably very few people actually paid attention to it, just like Cheney quotes. So Cheney, it was the same article. It was like RT saying, hey, watch the fuck out, because he prognosticated 9/11 as well. That's what they said in the spring of 2001. He predicted an attack, and it happened. And now he's predicted another attack. That's sketchy. So now we're in that time frame, because that was 3 years ago. We're into 3 to 4 years now. So it's like the next, I would say until the end of 2017 is that time frame where the false flag happens. And this is not scared rhetoric, but it's just to say what I've found and the evidence that I've seen. And the fact is that when Netanyahu says something like that, you got to really take that warning, because people don't realize Netanyahu's position is that, and also Netanyahu's creepiness. It's like, I don't know, Netanyahu is one of the most creepiest people of the whole, when it comes to the whole elite and their public figures. One of the creepiest ones out there, maybe because he's near the top of the ones in the public figures. Just, Obama, ultimately, Israel is ultimately a higher level. The United States is a lower level of power than Israel when it comes to the whole elite. And when you understand that, you understand the influence that they have in this country, and that the fact is that you can't criticize them. The media it works for them on what they say is that they don't say anything anti-Israel on the media. And you can't even say anything in real life to your friends. You can't talk about political Zionism. You can't talk about Zionist influence on politicians. And I'm sure there's somebody right now that's listening to this show and saying, "Oh, this fucking Nazi. Why is this guy talking about?" He's obviously talking Nazi conspiracy theories or something like that. That's probably what some guy's saying out there. But if you listen to my show just a few minutes ago, I was talking about how shitty Nazis were. I'm not a Nazi, obviously, and that's what that media has brainwashed you into thinking, that anyone that criticizes Israel is a Nazi. In fact, they share a lot. They're the ones that are, talking about a superior race. They're the ones that talk about deportation camps. This doesn't actually happen, and Israeli politicians suggested the Palestinians to be put in deportation camps. And, they talk about the extermination of Palestinians, laugh about the bombing of Palestinians, and talk about giving the Palestinians missiles of relish, giving the leveling Gaza. Talk about calling the Palestinians animals, calling the Palestinians subhuman. These are what the Zionist rabbis believe, and the Zionist politicians believe. And it's like I said, the Zionist rabbis are a big part of it. And they warp the religion of Judaism and turn it into this disgusting psycho cult that's called Zionism. It's a disturbing, it's a evil thing. It's a twisted, vile idea of Zionism. And this is what a lot of people in Israel believe, and that's probably why their society is so sick, and that their people have been shown to be part of the sickness of Zionism when they are watching Palestinians get bombed from hills. This is an entertaining thing for them to do. This is not a sign of a sane society. This is not the sign of a humane society. It's a sign of a corrupt, twisted, and dark society. And it's like I said, the Saudis, it's like they were trapped in the medieval times. And with their mentality that the Zionists have, it's not too far off. They are being, almost like fictional villains. Is when it comes to, this is a society, like I said, it's not sane. It's a society that's not humane. It's not sane. It's not humane. It's very bad. How the whole thing is over there, and people need to know how things really are. They see this propaganda of what they think Israel is, and it's so off from reality. And you have people over here who seem to be bowing down to Israel and putting their interests in front of American interests. Why? Why should we do that? Why Americans are doing way worse than the average Israeli. The Israelis are thriving on our money. There's 6 million of them, and they get $5 billion annually. So, like I said, this would be like, and also, let's put it another way, is that they get $8 million a day, and there's 6 million people. It's like giving every single person in Israel over $1 a day with our money. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but we're a country that can't be doing that. When we have Detroit, we have Philadelphia, all these major cities where these places are crumbling. People are freezing. Winter's starting again, and it's getting cold. And these people are having to start trash fires in order to stay warm. These people don't have food. These people are relying on, a single man, less than $100 of food stamps a month. I don't know when's the last time you tried to feed yourself for like $3 a day, but it's not very easy. And you have families getting just a few $100s. And it's, people call them lazy. And it's like, well, you shouldn't be relying on that, but they have no jobs there. The corporations have moved out. Our government let all these corporations leave and take all these jobs out. And also with NAFTA, it made it very easy with no penalties whatsoever. They left. Detroit, the 700,000 people that remain in the city are in a city barren of jobs and a city barren of prosperity. But yet, we're going to ignore those few million, and or 700,000, and we're going to pay attention to these 6 million over there overseas in Israel, way far away from the United States, to people that don't even really like us as Americans. While these people in Detroit were hard workers, people that went to work every day, worked very hard for their, for a modest paycheck, and to this day, they still try to make it, but it's very hard, and a lot of these people just can't leave. They can't just pack up and go to another city. And where they're going to go? Where you go to Cleveland, the things are not much better. There's a lot of jobs are gone there. Anywhere in Ohio, all the jobs. You go to Dayton, all the jobs are practically gone. You go to Indianapolis, the whole Midwest, it's been stripped away from jobs. You go to over to Lexington. I don't know. Now you're going to Kentucky. What is there? Maybe a few, or what's another Midwest city? How about go to Pittsburgh? There's not a lot of jobs there either. Pittsburgh, Dayton, Cleveland, Detroit, all these places now barren of jobs. And it's all mainly, talk about the Clintons. The Clintons say that they love the working class and that they've been fighting for the working class. And Bill Clinton was the one that pushed NAFTA and got NAFTA passed. And now NAFTA, you see the results of NAFTA. And you look at these cities that I just mentioned, and all these jobs now gone because of it. I am a firm supporter of nationalization of industry to prevent anything like that happening again. Because anyone that can look me in the eyes and tell me that these corporations have the right to do so, and that to move all those jobs after they developed the relationships with these people that worked in these cities, that these people went to work for them every single day loyally and gave a very good effort. And you're going to tell me, and you look at me in the eyes and tell me that these corporations had the right to pack up and just leave town like that and go to Mexico, whatnot, ship the jobs to Mexico. It's mind blowing, and the kind of apology. It's an apologist for economic criminals, and that's what I see a lot of. These people, these schmucks, these idiots. They're not idiots, but they're deceived. They're duped. They've been bamboozled. They've been duped into thinking that means economic freedom, to let corporations do whatever the hell they want to the working class, and that's where that's wrong. We need to do. There's certain things that need to be nationalized. And it's partially to protect the workers. It's also to protect the country in general. I look at the results inside of Venezuela. And people talk about all the shit about what's happened the last few months and whatnot with these shortages and they're heavily exaggerated by the media. But the results that they had happened from 1998 to 2011 were remarkable. Stuff that had almost never been seen in history. And it was because of moves like that. And it went from a third world country near the bottom of South America to one of the better ones in South America. And you look at other countries, Libya, what Gaddafi did and by nationalizing electric and other resources, and their economy booming like that. But you don't hear either of these politicians, Trump nor Clinton, talking about nationalization of our economy. They'd have the same mainline stance that corporations can do whatever the hell they want, because Clinton is a corporate shill, and Donald Trump, when Clinton takes a bunch of money from corporations, Donald Trump is one of the big people from a corporation. He has a giant corporation that is opportunistic on people and overcharges people, and also it screws over people living in his apartment. For sure, this guy didn't get rich off of being nice. This guy didn't get rich off of fair and being and totally. It was all the money that he's made. It'd be impossible that he's done it legitly. There's been definitely some shadiness. There's definitely been some corruption. And people that want to believe otherwise, it's cognitive dissonance. They want to support one of the candidates, and they think that Trump is the man that can fix everything for America. But unfortunately, he's not. Trump is looking out for himself. Trump is one of them. And why is it so hard for people to believe that he's one of them? Why do they want to? I know why they want to believe that he's not one of them. They want to believe that they have a choice out there on Tuesday, but there is no choice. And this is not me discouraging every single vote. I definitely suggest that if local elections, stuff like that, go out there, because you might be able to make a voice in that. But with the federal elections, it's all decided. It's all rigged, and you see how the media has been swaying this, and that's how it's going to go. Donald Trump is not going to win Tuesday. Hillary Clinton's going to win Tuesday, and when it does happen, most of the people are not going to care. Most of the people are not going to be mad. People are, with all the things she's done, they're not going to be mad. The fact is that we're going to be very screwed, and that this is the start of a very aggressive period in the United States foreign policy. And you can imagine, on domestic policy, she's going to be very strict when it comes to crime. Remember, her husband was the one that brought 3 strikes and you're out. And there's going to be measures that are going to be passed that are going to strongly affect minorities inside this country. The blacks, the Latins inside this country are going to face some very negative repercussions. And people being thrown away for a long time for nonviolent drug offenses. In this country, I think it's, despite them only making up 33% of the population or 65% of the prison population, black and Latin. I think that, and blacks in this country, there's obviously the main thing is that I think they're more likely to be profile police and caught. And a lot of times it's just nonviolent drug offense. People had a dime bag, these people, so many people in jail just for that. And there's a lot of people in prison just for selling. They had a big bag of pot that had 2 ounces on them, and they're thrown in jail. In South Carolina, you have people that are in prison for a long time, 30 years on just a few pounds of pot. And, it sounds like a lot, but, when you're selling, and, you get shipments all the time, that's not really that much. And, ultimately, what harm does it do? It does no harm at all. So these people are going to spend 30 years for pot. And you got other states where there's strict penalties, and all across the country, with large amounts like that, you're going to spend prison time, 5 years, 10 years. And besides a few states where it's legal, and that's the odd thing is in 4 states, you won't go to prison. But then again, you still get in trouble for selling without a license. you can imagine under Hillary Clinton that there's going to be some very strict regulations that are going to throw a lot of minorities in prison. There's going to throw people in general in prison. But it's the whole idea that she's going to mend the problems, the social problems between the inequalities between minorities, the inequalities, and then the supposed. And I say the supposed inequality between men and women when you look at it's a non-issue compared to the race problem in this country and the wealth problem in this country. So you have these people, we're having 50% of our population are in poverty. And a supposed first world country. And it's a first world country this is happening. 80% of the people, if they lost their next paycheck, would be homeless. That's not right. The amount of people that are living on $2 a day or less is now 4 times higher than it was in 1996. These are the kind of numbers. These people, talking about $2 a day or less, this is not just poverty. This is poverty. People living on the streets, homeless. They act like poverty is not really a problem. Yet 50% of this country are poor. You also have, at the same time, 400 people in this country control 80% of the country's wealth. 400 people in this country control 80% of the country's wealth. So you're telling me that 400 people, that's what you can cram onto a, you could put that inside on a bleachers at a high school football game. Put them on the bleachers right there. Those 400 people would have 80% of the country's wealth. And then the 319,999,600 other people are fighting for 20% of the wealth. And you put it, it's absolutely insane. And Hillary won't do anything about that. She's one of them. She's one of the people that's part of the New World Order plot that's making this country the way it is. And the people that want to go out there and vote for her, just remember all those people killed in Libya, all those people killed in Iraq, a war she pushed. 1.8 million Iraqis dead in Iraq. People don't seem to give a shit about foreigners and the ones killed in the wars overseas. Just imagine if it happened over here and some other military killed a million of our citizens. The reaction, and that's what happens over there. It's very sad. It's very sad that how Americans have gone with this lack of respect for people overseas, and the idea that they should have been bombed. Just like all those, especially in recent years, this idea has been pushed by the media that all those people were terrorists. That's what they say, is that they should have been bombed. They're all terrorists. When a lot of these people were just normal Joes, just like me and you, sometimes they were just going to work and their car got droned. They were enjoying their normal lives, and then they got killed. These people were driving down the street, and all of a sudden a drone strike attacked the area nearby. You're just going to buy some bread or buy some supplies, and that gets droned. It's absolutely awful. To think that in the sync of how the way they've talked about it, of these actions, and Hillary laughing about killing Gaddafi, and what that's led to in Libya. It's no joke. In Libya, their country's now torn apart with one militia controlling one area and their country's so split apart. The country's so divided now. And there's so much fighting and so much death and so much destruction. There's so much. Now there's people starving. Now there's people are without electric. Just all kinds of horrible things going inside of Libya now that weren't happening inside of Gaddafi's Libya. Libya now has suffered one of the biggest falls from a country that was very prosperous just a few years ago, has now became very weak and has been tore apart. Country that had a lot of stuff to look forward to, now the future is so uncertain with a lot of chaos and a lot of horrid stuff. And I'm looking right now at the chat room. And right now, let's see, guys. John Teeter is always participating. We got some of our usual people in here. It's kind of weird. And we've got a while left in the show, so I'll have to steer in another direction here. It's kind of weird. It's like you look through the chat room. Somebody mentioned my impersonation earlier about the Trump and the wall or whatnot. And somebody mentioned about that is that the Israelis have a wall, and you actually have these people that are. You have these Israelis. They'll be criticizing Trump for making for wanting to build a wall, but not. But they have a wall over there that separates them from the Palestinians. And the wall is just as stupid over there as it is over here. But what the wall does over there is that it keeps people from escaping. It keeps people trapped in an open-air prison instead of Palestine, where they are denied water, they're denied food, they're denied basic human rights. The Palestinians live in these horrible conditions. They live in these with terrible oppression. Partially because it's the wall, they can't escape, and they have all these, and they're not even allowed into Israeli society. They can't ride the same buses as Israelis. They can't go to the same place as Israelis. It's segregation, and the United States media will not acknowledge that there's segregation over there in Israel. That Israeli society is racist. That the Israelis are racist. And the fact is that they use the word goyim, which means cattle for most of us as Americans. The warm reaction that we have towards them, or the Americans have towards them, is not towards us back. In fact, they see us mostly as just, servants, like dogs. And you have even Gary Johnson won't acknowledge Israel's war crimes, the third-party candidate, which, as somebody in the chat room famously called him Spicoli. Because honestly, he seems to. I don't know if he's corrupt or clueless. I think it's really more corrupt. The fact is that he pretends to, to not really know about these issues. But he knows. And like I saw, is that with his quote on Israel, that he was boasting about, he was talking about how great it was to meet with these different, talk with these different Israeli leaders and these Israeli politicians, all war criminals, all horrible people, Ariel Sharon, Netanyahu, or whatnot. And yeah, that's not. The thing is, you mentioned Nazism. It's like that Zionism is doing what the Nazis did to them. But to them, I should mention is that when it comes to Zionist leaders, them is what the Nazis were. They worked with the Nazis. Is that the Nazis and the Zionists collaborated with each other with the transfer agreement. They're not that far apart, and it's not like the Zionists and the Nazis are, Zionism and Nazism are polar opposites. In fact, they're very similar ideologies, and they were actually worked together. In fact, in 1933, almost every party in Nazi Germany was shut down, besides the NSDAP, National Socialist Party, and the Zionist Party. So, besides when the Nazis cracked down, they cracked down on everybody by what we would think would be their mortal enemies, the Zionists. And by just looking at it from a surface deep perspective, they look like the Zionists, or they look like their enemies. But the Zionists and the Zionists, Nazis and the Zionists actually worked together. It was a transfer agreement and sent a lot of Jews to Palestine to conquer it, and later they ended up winning the civil war against the Palestinians, which, you could call it civil war or the takeover of Palestine. Is another way to mention it. Now, I was just looking through the chat room there for a second, and also, yeah, Ashkenazi. It's kind of weird that Ashkenazi has the last four letters of it is Nazi, when Ashkenazi Jews are what inhabit Israel. Semitic Jews are not even a big part of the Israeli equation. If you look at it from a purely perspective of, if you look at the whole situation from purely a perspective of who's there, it's very similar people. Well, not similar. These are Europeans, Jews there, and they're attacking Semitic Palestinians. They're the ones that are anti-Semites. They're the ones that are killing Semitic people. So the whole anti-Semitic thing is actually, it's not just wrong as in they're not Semitic. They're actually killing Semitic. So anti-Semitic is an ad hominem attack. It doesn't really warrant anything, and it's one of those things like it's kind of like what goes along to what is Trotsky. Apparently, is what I read is that Trotsky used the word racist against anybody that was against the Soviet government. I don't know how true that is. In fact, I'm just going to go fact check that right now, but. Sorry about that. I lost audio. I was just saying that Trump, Russia knows that Trump won't change anything because one of the things that Trump has done is he put a guy from the Council of Foreign Relations in a position in his future government. Now, Council of Foreign Relations, for people that don't know, is a think tank and an organization that pretty much decides our foreign policy. It's like pretty much like it's like what Kissinger's ideals wrapped up into an organization down the street from all the other stuff in Washington D.C. And Hillary Clinton said she was glad that the Council of Foreign Relations was right down the street because she didn't have to even really think about what she was doing. They just told her what to do. The Council of Foreign Relations would do the same as Trump. Is that Trump would be Trump would just listen to them, and I think that Trump presidency would go a little bit like a Bush presidency. Is that maybe Bush didn't have quite the knowledge of some of these different things that the United States government was involved with, but he just received the orders and did what the people that gave him the orders told him to do. Which the people, talk about the people that give the orders, the Council of Foreign Relations, the high-level think tanks, the big banks, the big corporations. There's a lot of people above the president. People think that the president is the one ultimately calling the shots, and I would see people, it seems like they dupe themselves. They know, they talk about how the president doesn't really run anything, but they'll still be enthusiastically supporting Trump into thinking that he's going to change everything. A lot of people fall for the Trump trap, but Putin sure as the hell not, because you can see through it. There's a guy from the Council of Foreign Relations on his campaign or on his future government. You have a Dick Cheney admirer, Mike Pence, as his running mate. Mike Pence, I'm pretty sure, supported just almost every other major establishment Republican position in recent times. I mean, you look at Mike Pence, and it's just, it's like I say, it would be like a Bush presidency, but Mike Pence, probably like Dick Cheney, would probably have a similar role as being the intermediary guy between the establishment and the president there, that kind of keep him in check. And I'm looking for the evidence about the Mike Pence where he talked. I know that he talked about Dick Cheney at one point. I'm pretty sure how he likes Dick Cheney, but ultimately that should be telling everything. That should be really telling. And there was a lot of Trump supporters that kind of were disillusioned after the Mike Pence decision to put Mike Pence, and not somebody seen as more anti-establishment. And there were a lot of people that were fans of Trump up to there, or that were fans of Trump until they realized who was he surrounded himself with. And Trump has even been around an establishment full such as Bachmann. Bachmann's a wild supporter of the war with Iran. Which Michelle Bachmann is a total, is like Palin. And that's another, and also that was another one that Trump hang around with. Sarah Palin's another one, another establishment tool, and for the whole reality show that is this election, she was just another actor in it. Looking, it's like all this talk about these washed up politicians. It's like maybe has me looking them up and seeing what they're even up to, and you see the shallowness. You see years of do-nothing governors, like Jeb Bush, like Sarah Palin, like Tim Kaine, all these people. They're just did nothing but serve themselves for a few years, got their buddy some favorable contracts, and did nothing really to help the people of their state. Did nothing but do what the agenda wanted them to do, that the establishment wanted them to do, the corporations, the New World Order. They're just another person in the plan. And I've talked a lot about this election, and talked a lot about the various things tonight. About just our crumbling country together. That this country, with our infrastructure crumbled apart, with the wealth inequality that we have, with the multiple other things that we face. It's not too hard to it's not too hard to get a little tired, of talking about it, and it seems like it's talking for many, many times and having the same talk with different people. But then again, the best thing we can do right now is try to win the information war and try to alert people what's going on, because I see people still desperately, trapped in the illusion. A lot of people just so distant from the reality of what's really going on in this country. These people on Facebook enthusiastically supporting one of these candidates, not knowing anything about their past, and just knowing what the commercials told them, just knowing what the news told them, what CNN, Fox, MSNBC told them, not knowing who runs CNN, Fox, MSNBC, not knowing who people like Soros or people like Haim Saban or Sheldon Adelson, all the Zionists and the Zionist influence on election. It's like, which, by the way, Simon Haben is the guy that wrote the Power Rangers. I guess he made he made a ton of money off of that. He's a billionaire. And Sheldon Adelson's a casino controller that is a Zionist and a billionaire. And there's people who don't know who Soros, they don't know who Rockefeller, Rothschild is. When the Rothschilds, when you talk about the printing of the money in this country, and who controls that, they can't even answer how that's done. How do we have? What is the Federal Reserve, and how does that work? People don't even know that the Federal Reserve is a private corporation and that they are a private bank. One time I said that there was a private bank, and somebody said, "Well, how do we know about it?" or something. How do we know about its existence? I'm like, no, not that kind of private. It's privately owned, with shareholders, and it was ran like a business, and you got different people own it, but ultimately at the head, ultimately the guys on top is the Rothschilds, and the Rothschilds are the printers of the United States dollar, but the Federal Reserve, no, then they charge the IRS, or then they charge the United States government the bill for doing so. The IRS then levies that to the American people. And the Rothschilds control the currency of the United States, which, as they say, is they control as a Rothschild said, if you control the currency, you control the country. They have, with the Rockefellers, they've had control. They control the oil, control the currency, control the food, total control, and people believe they're living in a free country. And as he sees that there are little things that they hand out in order to be able to make in this country a job. Once they can at any time take that away when they leave the country and start paying some people half the cost that they paid you, and make even more money. You saw as what we've seen with Ford and what these giant corporations did over in the Midwest, and what we've seen many corporations do throughout American history, and throughout history, from what they did in the Midwest and throughout history, is that any second when they decide that when there are a few billions not enough, they can just make a few more billion somewhere else. And that's the difference between us and Russia. Is that Russia, there's a kill switch, and that Putin, as we've seen, he stepped in some of these times where these corporations were screwing people over, screwing their workers over. Like I said, these loyal workers that come to work every day, and then these billionaires decide that they're not making enough money and close down the factory or whatnot for a short time, and are just trying to find a way where they can all make even more money. It's like what I see in that video was Putin and walking in there and telling them what's up, is that they're going to reopen that factory and he's not going to have to come back there again. And he showed, he stood up to those billionaire oligarchs and made them look like little boys. He made them look like a bunch of nervous teenagers and showed that he was the man. That he, representative of the Russian people, would do his job and protect his people. And that's what he's done in various situations and thrown these Russian oligarchs. No one's above the law in Russia. And that's what's great. There's no more back to the days in the 90s where they could do whatever they want and rip whatever people off they wanted and make billions of dollars off the exploitation of the Russian people, off the what we saw in the 90s where these billionaires made even more money there. Goldman Sachs is involved with the massive buyout in Russia. It's one of the biggest sell-offs in modern history. This just happened 20-something years ago. This wasn't supposed to happen in 1920 or something like that. It was just happened in the 1990s, where you could grab something for $50 million, what was worth $1 billion, as we saw what Berezovsky did, selling at 5% of the normal price. In 98, the Russian economy nearly collapsed. And with the Yeltsin era, and the fact that people think that Yeltsin did not do violent actions against his people, but actually in 91 and 93, he actually attacked the Russian parliament of people that were against him. His political opponents, he attacked. You don't hear that on these TV specials or whatnot, on your news when they talk about Vladimir Putin. And Vladimir Putin, they don't talk about what Yeltsin did. They won't talk about that Yeltsin. They brought their country to the collapse. And the fact is that Putin came in there. When Putin came in there, the people were so glad to finally see Yeltsin go, because the 90s were finally coming to an end in Russia, and the years of turmoil that brought with them. Yeltsin, in the 93 constitutional crisis, came down as a dictator, and in 91, there was actually two things that were around. Well, actually, Gorbachev was still the president in 91 when the 91 coup happened. There was an attempt to overthrow the government at the time, Gorbachev government, by hardliners, but that failed. But like I said, people might look back and say, in 1985, when Gorbachev came in, it was the opening of a better period in Russia, and that's what led to the prosperous period today. But that's not how it worked. No, it's that a new period, a worse, a period that was, during the Soviet times, there were some bad times, especially during Stalin. But were they near collapse like they were in '98? People starving, people freezing to death. I don't know about quite like that. During the Soviet times, there were some rough times. There was some, the 30s, the 40s, and obviously it was not fun a lot of times in the Soviet Union. But was it quite like the 90s, where their country was near falling apart? Russia was almost brought to its knees. It was the closest Russia had been to a collapse in its history, maybe. In recent history, the last 100 years. There's been a lot of changes in Russia in the last 100 years. 100 years ago, Russia was still ran by the Tsar, and then they had the whole entire Soviet period, the Yeltsin era, now Putin era, the country's back to being prosperous, being a country with religious freedom, minorities protected, and free of oligarchs. But there's still the outside sabotage you have to worry about. There's still, you have people in the CIA, or a former CIA guy said that the way to take out Putin would be a bullet through his head. And they want, I know that's definitely in the cards, that there's a possibility that an assassination on Putin would be one of the things they're trying to do. They did kill his driver, or at least, he got in a car accident. Remember that his preferred driver got in a car accident and was killed. And it was right before they were going to go to a car that was like practically indestructible, but instead he was still in the old car that was still vulnerable, and he gets hit. It just seems to be a little suspicious, doesn't it? That this just happens to happen. And he just happens to get in a car accident. And it was a fatal one, so it must have been pretty bad. And he's a very careful, imagine he's a great driver, so it wasn't most likely something he did. Probably might have been something someone else did. Anyways, we're actually pretty late in the show now, so I want to go back and chat with me. Hopefully I don't disconnect like last time. I gotta look up Temple real quick. There's been all this demonization against Putin, but there is achievements also with the continuation of the free education system inside of Russia and the free medical care. The free medical system inside of Russia have not been acknowledged. As well, the achievements of the military campaigns against terrorism have not been acknowledged. The achievements of the open up with diplomacy with many, many different countries, and Russia has also been, a big part of keeping they've shown a lot of restraint in the Ukrainian crisis, in the Ukrainian war. That they could have intervened, they could have went in there and invaded Ukraine, and they had a lot of justification to do so because of what's happened to the East Ukrainians by the West Ukrainian military. But they've restrained themselves. They've restrained themselves from doing so. They know that could possibly lead to a confrontation with the United States, and that's something Russia doesn't want. Russia, despite the contrary, despite what the media is saying that they want a world war, they don't want a world war, and they don't want more innocent, people being caught in crossfires in a war in East Ukraine. And with 20 minutes left, I think the most important thing that you can get out of the show and about the fun and all that is that it's very sad what the media has done, what the media has done to the people in the United States. Is that they got everybody fearing the Russians. They got everybody fearing the idea. They have them believing that world war with Russia is coming. They have them believing that the Russians are out to get us. And the Russian people don't want war with us. The Russian people saw a war with the Nazis. They don't want another war with another fascist country like the United States government, and they don't want millions of their people getting killed. The Russians are normal people like me and you. They're not any different. They have a very similar culture, but may not quite like the degenerated American culture of today. But they are similar. They are a little bit more aware of what's going on. But their people don't want war with the Americans. The people generally don't. The people generally don't hate Americans. They know that our government's the ones responsible for what the American military's done overseas, and yeah, they might not be thrilled about us as American people and our complacency with this, and the fact that a lot of us have been pretty subservient to what our government's done, but they don't hate us, and they don't see us definitely as servants like the Israeli government and the Israeli people see us as military men to die in their wars, like what they want us to do in Iran and fight their war over there between with the United States and Iran fighting, and having us may sacrifice 500,000 of our men over there. This is the stuff that the true patriots of the United States should be addressing, and not worrying so much about Muslims. It's the most ridiculous thing. I see people calling themselves patriots, and they're talking about these Trump supporters. And they're so worried about the Muslims, but Muslims are not the ones that are influencing your media. The Muslims are not the ones that are influencing your politicians. The Muslims are not the ones that want your men to go fight in their war. The Zionists, they're influencing your media. They're influencing your politicians. They want us to go to Iran. And they're not going to go to Iran by themselves. They want us there to back them up. And even though it has no real purpose for the American people to be there, the American people will gain nothing from a war with Iran. And the whole idea of cheap oil, subsidizing oil with the blood of young Americans, how brilliant of an idea does that sound? It goes back to what... And I hear these people just regurgitating the same garbage that they heard on CNN, MSNBC, Fox about how Iran are extremists or whatnot. I remember one time running into one of these Zionists, brainwashed by his parents. He was a Jew, Zionist, and I've seen both sides. I've seen Jews that were, I'm pretty sure would not, if they knew what was going on over there, would not support what the Israelis doing. But this guy knew what was going on and knew and supported what the Israelis were doing. Or he pushed the same bullshit lines that they always do. The Palestinians are shooting rockets at us. The Palestinians, playing the victim card. But and then he said that we should just evacuate the Middle East and nuke ISIS. That's his solution. This is a genius solution. This is the people that I've had to deal with before. These geniuses that are being pumped out by the education system And these are all people that I saw in high school. Usually, when I talk about different instances where I ran into people, he was one of the people that confronted me about my anti-Israel views. But I stuck firm to it. I think he's thinking that I was gonna be like, oh no, I'm just posting that. I was like, no, because the Israelis are killing Palestinians. So I post that stuff. And then nowadays, if I ran into him, I would go as further to say, it was like, Israel's fucking financing ISIS. Israel are, the Israeli government are fucking psychopaths, or if they're psychopaths or / fanatics, whatever way you want to see it, so absorbed into their ideology. And I don't know if they actually truly believe their ideology, or their people believe their ideology, and they're just pretend to believe that shit about being divine gods on this planet or whatnot. And they're also, at the same time, they seem to want to pretend to reach their olive branch out to Russia and act like they're going to be their buddies or whatnot. But that the Zionists deep down, and that Netanyahu wants to destroy Russia and wants to get rid of Putin, because Putin's the biggest obstacle to the Middle East. Because as long as Putin's around, Assad and the Iranian government seem to be kind of cemented down into place. But if Putin's gone, then Israel might be able to take it for the taking. If Putin wasn't there, Assad would be gone, and most likely Assad would be most likely been overthrown. Putin was the one that negotiated the removal of the chemical weapons from Syria in exchange for not having the war, which, remember, the United States was very close to launching strikes in Syria. Remember, it was all based on those chemical weapons footages, apparently, that apparently Assad had used chemical weapons in Damascus, but in reality, those footage from Damascus was Saudi film crews. In Aleppo, I think they said he also used chemical weapons, but the one was Damascus that they really scared people with. But Damascus, they didn't use chemical weapons against the people of Damascus. There's no evidence of it. In fact, there was evidence that was fake. In fact, that was what was confirmed. That was fake. Saudi movie crews and the Saudi government did a Hollywood-style production in order to manufacture the fear and manufacture this fake sorrow. When the Saudis have supported ISIS, they've supported these horrible people, and actually the Saudis do all their horrible human rights abuses, and they're going to care about human rights for just this moment in order to be opportunistic against the Assad government. They call that barrel shit Saudi. They call him a king, and they call all his family the princes or whatnot, and they call the doctor a dictator. Remember that Bashar al-Assad is actually a medical doctor, and he actually didn't really have much ambitions to be in politics until his brother was killed in a car crash. He was seen as a successor, and before his father died. His father died in 2000. That's when Bashar al-Assad took over. He's been in charge for the 2000s and will likely be in power for a little bit longer. I mean, he got reelected in 2014 with 88.7% of the vote. And also, another thing about Putin is that they say that he's so disliked in this country. What other leaders can you name have an 89% approval rating? 89%. 89% approval rating, and you can't get that kind of approval rating for get an 89% approval rating. Get 89 people have 100 degree on something. I could go into a crowd right now and say, I don't know. What's a good analogy for this? I could go into a crowd and say, sunny days are nice days to be walking outside. And it might be hard to get 89 people to agree to that. There might be there'll be the few goth chicks in the back that'll be like, no, I actually like rainy days. it's like stuff that a lot of people would agree on is good. It'd be hard to get 89 people to agree on, but they got 89 people to agree that Putin is a good leader inside of Russia. There'd be also you could you could ask 89 people that ask 89 people if dogs are cute, and then you have probably only get maybe 55 people up there that would raise their hands or something like that. It's like I'm pretty sure Putin beats a lot of stuff when it comes to what you can get 89% approval of. There's not too much stuff you can get 89% approval on in any crowd. I mean, 89% approval. That's what he has for his country. A giant sampling size like that of his country. And they like him that much. The opposition side of his country are very unpopular. I mean, I can see why. You got the billionaire oligarch Prokofiev, which he's the owner of the Brooklyn Nets. And he ran against Putin in 2012, but only got like 6% of the vote. You got Gennady Zyuganov, who is a Stalinist, and kind of just generally seems to be kind of a crude and not very charismatic man. He got like 17% of the vote in 2012. You got Zernovsky, who is an Israeli supporter. So he's got like 2% of the vote. And ever since Euromaidan, he's one of those people that's a nationalist. But he's a nationalist until the big conflict of interest that is supporting Israel while you claim to be a nationalist. And he supports Israel. So he's obviously not a nationalist, because anyone that's truly a patriot towards Russia would not support Israel, because Israel's goal is to tear apart Russia. Zernovsky, there's Navalny, who went to jail. He's a whistleblower inside the country. Well, he's a blogger. And actually, RT gave some support to Navalny. And it's funny, that's RT giving support to Navalny would almost be the equivalent of CNN giving support to Snowden. It shows the difference between the freedom of speech in Russia and the United States, and that there's a lot more of it in Russia than you would see here in the United States. In fact, a lot of countries, and not just Russia, but Russia, they allow a lot of bad talk towards Putin to go on. But it's not just in Russia, but for example, in Venezuela, they allowed the talk of calling for the assassination of Hugo Chavez on the opposition media, and they said that Venezuela have practically no freedom of speech. They have 60% of their, more than 60% of their, like 85% of their channels were opposition ran, and not 60%. And here in this country, we have 100% are pro-government. Even Fox News, people say, well, Fox News isn't pro-Obama, but they're still pro-establishment, and they're pro-Republican Party. That's not anti-government. Fox News is not anti-government. And if Fox News is ran by an Aussie billionaire and a Saudi prince, CNN, MSNBC, that's our big three, and we have 100% pro-government news in the United States. While in other countries, they actually have opposition news, and then they actually have news that disagrees with the government and has different views than the government. For example, in Russia, they have the communists that have their own news network, and they don't really agree with Putin. In fact, they call him like a crook and a thief. You don't hear that kind of rhetoric on any of our mainstream media about Obama. Imagine if they said that. They have to be so careful with the political correctness. They have to be so careful with what we consider harsh rhetoric. And when it comes to the plan of actions like the NSA, or it comes to the Guantanamo Bay, they seem to be all in agreement. When it comes to taking away your rights, when it comes to wars, they seem to be all in agreement. So they have all these superficial issues that they disagree on. That they disagree on gay marriage, or they disagree on transgender rights. it's all a show debate. For example, they're talking about when the TPP was about to be passed, they're talking about the transgender bathrooms. It really seems like something out of a comedy sketch. Is that they're about to talk about some serious issues. We have stuff about to heat up when there's a war about to blow up in Syria. They're talking about transgender bathrooms. They're talking about Caitlyn Jenner. Caitlyn Jenner took up a lot of a season in 2015. Was what we heard about. And then when you start talking about how that was not really relevant news, they called you a bigot. And, nowadays it's like if you seem to be disagreeing with what's going on with our prioritization of issues in this country, they call you deplorable. So that's the new term. And they apply it to a lot of Trump supporters. They apply it in what they're pointing to, the people that are the people that don't agree with focusing on these stupid issues while we have money going to these terrible people, going to the Israeli government, the Saudi government. And unfortunately, some of the people that think like us are Trump supporters. And they're going to try to connect us. They try to connect us with Trump. They say that us conspiracy theorists, conspiracy realists are Trump supporters, when we're obviously not Trump supporters. I'm not a Trump supporter. You are not a Trump supporter. I mean, people that are on UCY are generally not Trump supporters because we see past this illusion of election. They try to associate also the people putting in to Trump. They even try to associate Hugo Chavez to Trump, which is just a complete insult. And associating with me to Trump would be highly inaccurate. People listening that don't really know much about politics, it's probably what they think, what they hear me talk about. They think I'm just some Trump supporter. I'm some fucking hillbilly right now drinking a Miller Lite, and I got the football game in the background, something like that. I don't got the TV playing in my room. I do got my raised bobbleheads up there, but and also I'm not a fucking Trump supporter. I see past this illusion of a system, and the selection has already been made for Hillary Clinton. And as going on towards finishing the show up, and we go into the last minutes of the show. That's what I was saying. Is they connect us conspiracy theorists, us conspiracy realists, us truthers to Trump. We're not connected to Trump. Conspiracy theorists, conspiracy realists, truthers are not connected to Trump. And Putin, he's done a great job over there in Russia, and I hope people realize that a war with Putin be a war against progress, a war against a real leader who's done a lot for his country and fixed a lot of problems and cared a lot of people. He's brought that country forward and brought the country away from collapse. Bankers and oligarchs don't like him. The New World Order doesn't like him. And that's why we should like him. That's why we should realize that he is a roadblock to their system and a roadblock to their plan. Thanks everyone for tuning in to UCY Radio and Voice of Rebellion tonight. If you haven't subscribed to me on Facebook, subscribe to me on Facebook at Chris Jackson Rojas. And next week we'll be back Sunday at
no return and nobody can stop it. Malcolm Little when he knelt before Elijah Muhammad that commented, killed the dinosaurs, changing the earth. They love to criticize, they always say I changed for the worse. Like prescription pills when you misusing them, nigga. The Templar Knights when they took Jerusalem, nigga, and figured out what was buried under Solomon's temple, Al-Aqsa. The name is not coincidental. I know too much, the government is trying to murder me. No coming back like cutting your wrists open vertically. How could the serpent be purposely put in charge of the country? Genetic engineered sickness spread amongst me. My people are so hungry that they attack without reason, like a fucking dog ripping off the hand that feeds him. Immortal technique is treason to the Patriot Act. So come and get me, motherfucker, cause I'm not coming back. This is the point from which I can never return. And if I back down